My name is Matthew Ashdown, Gene Keys Guide. Welcome to another interview with somebody from the Gene Keys community. And I snuck in somebody here who's not a Gene Keys Guide, not a Gene Keys ambassador, but she's a good friend, has a lot to offer, and I thought you needed to hear from her. So that's who we're going to work with today. And very much looking forward to this conversation with Dana Kraft, who I'll introduce in just a moment. Now, the time I'm recording this, we are sitting in the pulse of the 8th gene key. The 8th gene key moving from the shadow of mediocrity to the gift of style, and it's the city of exquisiteness. And so we are here to express our uniqueness. So this is my intention in this space as we see Dana expressing her uniqueness and myself doing the best to express my uniqueness, and then inspiring everybody here to step into their uniqueness. And so Welcome to this call. I'm looking forward to our conversation. Many people here, many people watching, I should say, are probably fresh from their experience of the Into the Mystic event in Boulder, Colorado. And if you weren't there for the live event, perhaps you got to watch it on the live stream. And so we're also in the field of that energy right now. So it'll be interesting to see what emerges and what Dana picks up intuitively. So without further ado, we'll begin this interview. Now, Dana is somebody that I met through a common passion for Avalon, the myths of Avalon, the Grail quests of Arthurian legends, and much more. And she, too, is somebody who spent time in the mystical town of Glastonbury in the UK. But that's not where she lives right now, and that's not where she's from. So I'm just going to give her a few moments to introduce herself and kind of like where she's from and what she does and where she lives right now. So Dana, welcome. I'm handing it over to you.
Thank you so much, Matthew. I'm so happy to be here and share in this space with you, as always. So I've been reflecting that, thankfully, I'm getting older, so my story is getting longer. My biography and where I'm from and what I do is also getting longer, thankfully. So I guess I'll start just from where I am now. I live in Oaxaca, Mexico. I've been living in Mexico for 12 years, and the majority of that I've been here in Oaxaca, a magical and mystical place indeed, very different from the British Isles, but a very magical and grounded earth energy. I live overlooking here from my roof. I can see two of the major Zapotec ruins and sacred sites here in Oaxaca at Zompa and Montalban, and a very grounded and plant-based, earth-based culture here where I live in Mexico. And I am a herbalist, a traditional naturopath, and a flower essence therapist. I trained in the UK. I lived in the UK for many, many years. And I consider that to be one of my spiritual homes, particularly around the West Country, where I know you were born and where these beautiful tales that we connect with have their grounding and their roots. Although Avalon, of course, is an infinite and eternal space. And previous to that, I lived in Spain for a while, and originally I'm from Manhattan. I was born in New York City and raised in the countryside about 45 minutes outside of New York. And I've always been a nature lover and connected to the natural world from the time I was a very little girl. And so what I do now, thankfully, is my work, my professional work, and my passion for nature have come together. And particularly, I love working with flower essences. So I know that's something that comes up a lot with the Gene Keys and the calls that we've been doing on Clubhouse, which maybe some people who are listening here have had a chance to tune in, and if they haven't, they will, hopefully. Yeah, I'll stop there and see if there's an emerging question.
There's always emerging questions. I got so many damn questions. Which one's first? Which one's first? No, I love that. I love the introduction there. And just, you were talking about, this is a slight deviation, but I love it. You're just talking about the West Country. And I've just been witness to somebody that we both know, who's Dr. Martin Shaw, and he's from Devonshire in England, which is where our good friend Richard Rudd is from. The person behind all of this wisdom with the Gene Keys, he is from that same part of the world. And the West Country, this West Country where Glastonbury is, it's like, I love all the different accents and dialects throughout the UK. And, and one of the things that I always found funny as a young man was that in Star Wars, the voice of Darth Vader is James Earl Jones, right, with a big pounding voice. Luke, I am your father. And but the guy inside it, the guy who was he was a big actor. I can't, David White? No, not David White. Was it? I can't remember his last name. He's a David. And he was from Bristol in the West Country, which was where I was born. And, people would often ask us, why did they choose James Earl Jones with his Luke, I am your father, instead of this, using this guy's voice? And can you just imagine it coming out in a West Country accent? It's like, Luke, I be your father, I be. It doesn't quite have the same ring to it.
Not
I love that West Country. I love that West Country accent, and I got to hear some of it through Dr. Martin Shaw the other day. And so, yeah, this love of the land that you have, like you talked about it in Oaxaca, Mexico, where you are. You came from quite a different origin, coming originally from Manhattan, which I always imagine, I've never been there. I always imagine it to be more of like a concrete jungle, if anything. And here you've been drawn to these places where you found this love of nature and this love of the land. And what I'm kind of interested too is, of course, we're working with the Gene Keys community here, and you've been somebody who's been, from what I remember, you've been working actually with the Gene Keys. Although you're not a guide, you haven't felt that call necessarily. You have been working with the Gene Keys for at least 10 years now. So I'm intrigued to know, how did you stumble upon this world of the Gene Keys? And then we can explore how you work with it in your own unique way through this love of the natural world too.
Yeah, thanks, Matthew. So I was living in a different part of Mexico, actually the first place I landed. And I think it's significant to share that I was living in the UK. I finished my naturopathic training. I'm very much consider myself a British trained herbalist. The British trained and apprenticed in Mexico is kind of how I see part of my journey as a practitioner. Because here in Mexico is where I was able to get even more deep into the plant spirit medicine and my connection with the herbs in a different way, let's say. But I was living in the UK and I applied for a permanent visa to stay in the UK, which was my plan, to stay forever, really. And I was in Mexico on vacation with my mom when I found out that my UK visa had been rejected with no possibility for appeal. And so that was in 2011. I was thankfully able to go back and close up my clinic and get all my belongings and do all those things. But I feel like I was picked up out of the UK and placed into the center of Mexico just in time for 2012, which is another topic we could say. And all the doors kind of opened to a whole new life experience for me as a woman, as a practitioner, as someone who works in the healing arts. And one of my great teachers and friends, Dr. Cynthia Miller, who I worked with and I met in this part of Mexico in San Miguel de Allende, she was the one who discovered Gene Keys on her own path. And she talked to me about it. She showed me my chart. And so I bought the book. And so for about maybe 8 years, it was just me and my Gene Keys book. And I would sort of peek my head out and see what was going on online courses and what books. And I felt like I was somehow connected, but my intuition kept guiding me, like, just read your book, just keep reading your book. And so I was contemplating the Gene Keys for a long time on my own. And until I really met you, Matthew, and started taking your courses and doing our one-to-one sessions, that's when I sort of got pulled into this wonderful Gene Keys world with all of you. And it definitely has hugely deepened my experience with the Gene Keys. But previous to that, it was an organic contemplation. And for over the years, I would scribble. You can see my book is very scribbly, I must admit. And I would scribble flower essences and plant spirits all those years, just checking it out. And for myself, I thought it'd be interesting that flower essences would just pop into my consciousness related to those Gene Keys. So the fact that it's kind of coming together in a more of a way that I can share those feelings and intuitions that I have is really fun for me.
That's so cool. And, you know, for anybody who's joined in, myself and Dana and our good friend Thibaut in France, we are multilingual. Well, we're not multilingual, we're multi-country. We are all over the geography. We've hosted these spaces on Clubhouse now a few times, and I've had really great feedback from people in terms of what you bring to the table with this work with the flower essences. And what really stands out for people is that you are taking this flower essence as you are transmitting to the rest of us, and it's almost like we partake of it with you, and at the same time we can begin to bring that into our own life. And you know, we've interviewed Tamara Bacalo here, and there's others that work with the gene keys in terms of relationship to the natural world, and there's been this kind of correlation that people have found between certain plants and the gene keys, just like with the Dream Arc program that we've been working with certain animals with the gene keys and creatures. And so you know, I found this very intriguing as you've been sitting with these, because I'm really intrigued by your process, you know, because we could take something and try to make it fit the gene keys, right, for instance. But what I've noted in just talking to you and listening to you through this process is it's like you really sit with the whole transmission of a particular gene key, and you really feel intuitively into what's there. And I'd be interested to hear if you'd be just kind of open to share any of your process, and if there's a particular flower essence that at this time you're really working with because you're really feeling the value in it, and if it does connect to a particular gene key in any way.
So my process, it's an interesting question. There's something really beautiful that's been happening in the contemplations where I say beautiful and a little frightening, because we have our Clubhouse and I'm pondering and what I've noticed is there's a lesson for me around letting go, around letting things emerge, or as you say in the Gene Keys community, letting things come alive. So with the flower essences particularly that we've been working on in the Clubhouse calls, because that's been a focus of my intention with this work. What's been really interesting is that I usually get two really fast, and they'll just come straight through. I don't really think about it. They're just sort of obvious matches, or they're already scribbled in the corner of the gene keys that I wrote, you know, 8 years ago or something. And I think, oh, I agree with myself. You know, I wrote this down 8 years ago. This is a good essence. And then I'll do some, you know, further contemplations and ponderings. And it's always this third one that seems to, in these calls that we've done, there've been 3 now, 3 Clubhouse calls so far. It's been that third one that has really asked me to surrender and wait. Patience being a practice of mine, a personal practice. And so if there's anything particularly, any essence, I would say in this last call, we were working with the Springs of Avalon and the 2nd gene key. Right now we are in the programming partner, the 8th gene key. And the one that came through really powerfully was the pomegranate flower essence, which is our essence around themes around the goddess and the divine feminine. And we can go in more deeply into that if you want to, but there was something around the way that third came in as a synergy, and working with that trinity has been a very interesting process for me. In my one-to-one sessions, in my formulas, I rarely would put just 3 essences. So it's been a fun kind of dance to bring that through as a practice, and then to see how the 3 work together in that force field has been really interesting and beautiful and uplifting. And I've been taking the 3 essences beforehand and after and during our call, and I've really experienced how that trinity has been coming through in the contemplations.
Yeah, that's really neat. And is there one that, aside from that last call that we did. So I'll put the replays in here so anybody can listen to the 3 replays. And the last one we did was Springs of Avalon. Is there a particular essence? You're probably working with your essences with clients every day, but is there one that you're really surrendering to right now at this time? Is that something that's occurring in this time?
Right now, I am in love with roses. I have planted, I think I have 8 or 10 different color roses in my garden right now. And in my work with plant spirit medicine, flower essences, we always say that the presence is the medicine. So, and I actually would love to share a little bit about what flower essences are. Maybe if anyone's listening who doesn't have a context for that, because this would be a good moment to, and it kind of swings into the second gene key in a way too, is that we say the presence is the medicine. So I think we all can relate to an experience where you're walking somewhere, you're out in the fields, or you're in a city or anywhere, and you happen to see an incredibly beautiful flower that really calls to you. And right in that moment, there's an uplifting. There's something that changes in your field when you connect to a plant. It could be also a tree or any other plant, but particularly when we're talking about flowers, because there's a relationship that we have from a medicinal point of view. To just today, I was out walking Oaxaca and there was a huge bougainvillea, but the really magenta bougainvillea. And that's a plant that fortunately I see all the time, but it was so massive and just packed with flowers and bees. And I really had an experience of just spending a few minutes looking and admiring that plant. And bougainvillea is a flower essence that we work with for childlike glee and happiness and uplifting. So flower essences in themselves, what they are, designed by Dr. Bach's system, is it's a glass bowl filled with spring water, ideally spring water. We place the flowers floating across the surface of the bowl, and we leave this bowl near the plant, touching the earth, in sunlight for 4 hours, or moonlight. It can also be moonlight for the moon essences. And that water captures the vibration of the flower. So then we have a processing experience where we use usually brandy to capture the essence so that it's not just water and it doesn't ferment. But I keep thinking about this after all these years. It's like we're actually, you see a flower and we're taking drops of a flower. That's what a flower essence is. I just think that's so extraordinary. It's such an extraordinary medicine when we think about it. And of course, we have the systems and what do they do and what's the negative trait and what's the positive trait and how it works together with our shadow and our gifts and our cities and all of these vibrational frequencies. But in and of itself, we're talking about how we can bring the magic of a flower into our system. And I just find that so incredibly beautiful. And so to answer your question, I'm really into the roses right now. And the roses are all on their spectrum, depending on their colors. And there's so many different varieties, but roses are really deep heart medicine. They're very much the compassion. The red rose is considered to be the highest frequency of compassion in all the flower essence system. So you can never go wrong with the roses, the rose medicine. And my SQ is 40.6. So that sort of surrendering and opening is very much a rose medicine for me and for my heart. Yeah.
Wow. Yeah, it's interesting because when I think of rose, I think of the Venus, and Venus is that influence on our SQ sphere, or the SQ sphere is based upon the position of Venus. 88 degrees before we were born. So I love this. I love this alignment. Somebody actually just before we'd come onto this call had shared about the divine Sophia and the rose and the mysteries there. So there is the rose essence was coming in before we even had our conversation. But I really appreciate that. And what you said about the colors, and we had Tamara Bacalo on before, and I think I'd asked her a question about roses then. So I won't dive too far into this and the roses at this time, but I just love that process and that really listening. I love that about the Trinities too. How you work with the Trinities. It's like Richard Rudd would be so proud. He loved of the Trinities, anything in the threes. And so, I think it's really cool. And we've been having these meetups now. And one of the things that you do is you talk about the presence of the flower. And I really love that. It's like when we're out in nature and we're actually, being with a tree or we're being with a plant, and you can feel it's almost like you can feel that essence and that energy if we're sensitive enough, if we slow down enough. I think that's a big part of it, isn't it? Slowing down enough to be able to receive these plants. And so one of the things that when we've been on our calls is that it's like, I'm now just going to take this flower essence on behalf of the group, because not everybody's going to have that flower essence available. And so can you speak to what takes place within inside of you and the transmission and how that influences the field? Because I know for myself that when I've been in that experience, it's like there's a shift, there's an energetic shift that takes place when you do that. Are you able to kind of unravel that a little bit for the curious minded like myself?
Well, let's say in those Clubhouse calls, by the time we get to my part or my spiel or my sharing, we've already kind of attuned, right? So we've done our attunement. You've been sharing. We're tuning into the frequency of the gene key together. We're tuning into the archetypes together. And so when I take the essence, I'm taking the drops, and the vibration is coming through and rippling out into the fields, because the essence itself is working on, it's a vibrational medicine. So I think what's been really beautiful for me is that there's a receptivity in the field already. So if we were to just come onto the Clubhouse and I were to say, okay, everybody, I'm going to take the essence, it would be in the field. But I think what's been beautiful in the calls is that we're really attuning ourselves. So there's a great receptivity. And when I've been taking the essences, particularly the last call, we were in the second gene key. So I think we had some watery support there. And I really felt the kind of the waves of the medicine really move through, especially by the time we got to the third one. It's like we'd sort of really set the stage and some layers had moved there. That was my experience of it anyway.
Yeah, that so makes sense, that receptivity. And I think that that's such an important aspect of it. So the field has already been co-created. We're co-creating that field, and there's that openness. And I think anybody coming to this kind of work, there's got to be some level of this openness. But what comes across for me when you're sharing is, and what you shared so far is just I can feel your passion for this deep love of the natural world. And, we talked about how Glastonbury and the herbal you've had herbalist training as well. And so, this goes beyond just the flower essences for you. It's like just this wide, arena of interest and intrigue, and so much of it, with this work with the gene keys, it's about the embodiment of this, and many people are drawn to. I've heard a number of people today talking about mushroom ceremonies that they've been on. I think you went on a mushroom journey, I believe, recently. And so here we've got this another way of receiving and communicating with this natural world, and something that might support this gene key process. So, if somebody's wanting to explore, they're working with a particular gene key, right? And it's, the logical mind wants to look for a particular, what's the flower essence associated with this gene key or something like that. And there might be that aspect of it. But if you were just talking about this open receptivity, and somebody's contemplating a particular key in their life, in their world, how might they engage with the world around them to receive some, because you talk a lot about the surrender in that sense. And I'm just wondering if there's anything, this kind of question is just coming out of nowhere, really, but I'm trusting it's landing, so I'll leave you with it.
So my advice always is, when you want to work with plants, is first and foremost, pay attention. Just pay attention. Just see what's a perfume that calls to you. What is, you're driving to work and you're on autopilot and you just keep looking at the same, every day you turn and you look at the same plant. Or suddenly there's tons of dandelions in your yard. You know, there's a famous quote, I can't remember who it is right now, but who says, if dandelions were hard to grow, they would be most welcome on any yard. So if you start to see a plant regularly, or you notice that it shows up even on your plate. I work very closely with a plant called borage, which is also starflower. It's a beautiful blue flower, which you will often see in restaurants, like in salad blends and in desserts and all these kind of things. And there was one week where I just had borage. Every time I went anywhere, there was a borage on my plate somehow. I was like, okay, you know, I'm noticing, I'm receiving the medicine here. So particularly if you notice these things, while we're transiting, while we're in a pulse, or while you're working your contemplation, if it's like the dream arc in a way. I mean, if we're going to say if I start seeing raccoons everywhere, I'm going to be paying attention. Right?
Yeah, that's what I'm hearing. Absolutely. And it's funny you mentioned borage, because I just had a friend yesterday say to me, I've got some borage. Do you guys want that for? I'm like, okay. So straight away, now I'm like, okay, what's borage then? What am I receiving? What am I opening my arms to here? You and your infinite intuition just mentioned it out loud, and I was offered some yesterday. So can we explore borage as an example, perhaps?
Yeah, anytime. We can talk about borage anytime. So borage, the British adage is borage for courage. Borage for courage, because borage is Barago officinalis, which originally comes from corago, corazon, heart, courage. So that's the energetic sort of baseline for borage. We're talking about heart medicine. We're talking about, and I mean, physical heart, we can maybe say yes, but parallel this to what I'm going to share. We're talking more about the energetic and emotional heart. So the flower essence is the great uplifter for when we feel disheartened, discouraged. There's that word again. Anything around feeling an uplift in the heart. Also because it's a star-shaped flower and it's a beautiful, beautiful shade of blue. So I find that it also has a throat chakra connection because of its shade. So although it's very much a heart-centered medicine, it has that heart into the throat, kind of opening that channel of when we can really be courageous enough to open the heart and speak the throat chakra directly from the heart.
Well, this suddenly feels like it's related to this 8th gene key pulse that we might be going through here. The 8th gene key, yeah, just this expressing our uniqueness, right? I would say that that's a big piece with this 8th gene key. It's about style. It's about expressing our uniqueness, expressing our unique style, and that takes courage to be able to put ourselves out there, to risk, to risk rejection, to risk not being accepted. And somebody else that I've been invoking in my world recently, and the conversations have arisen around, is Archangel Michael. And his association in the Gene Keys work with the first sacred seal, which again comes right back to the heart of you with that 40th Gene Key as your SQ sphere, the gift of resolve with the city of divine will. And so I'm really hearing, it's like, wow, yeah, again, I'm looking at the other conversations that I've been having, and it's like, oh, I was talking about the courage. Courage has come up in a conversation earlier today in a group of men. That we were having a conversation, and the courage that it took one man to voice something that birthed the whole conversation. And it was just beautiful to watch it unfold. And so, and here it was. And this is what I love about this, is like, none of this stuff that's coming our way is by accident. And I love what you said, pay attention. Because that's what the dream arc is we're paying attention to the world of creatures. And what you're saying is pay attention to the world of the flowers and the fauna that show up. And I love that you use borage. Like, that's just the perfect example, because I can speak to it. Because as you were mentioning it, I was thinking, well, yeah, I've got daffodils growing here, and and then you mentioned borage, and I'm like, well, wait a minute, I was just offered this borage, and I did not know that, and I receive it with even more awareness now. and just love the timing and trust that. So that's beautiful. That's really cool. And so perhaps even that it might even have this connection with the first sacred seal in some way, for me anyway. I don't know about for you.
I would definitely say so. In my what I consider to be limited understandings of the seals thus far, but it feels right. It feels right when you talk about it in the first seal. And also borage is a deep, deep nervous system tonic. So we have lots of wonderful plants for the nervous system in herbal medicine that may be sedatives, sleep aids. We have a whole group of plants called adaptogens, which help us to adapt to stress. Borage for me is the deep tonic of one that traditionally, especially in the UK, is for convalescence. For example, when you've been ill and you want to recover your strength. So there's something very physical body around that deep tissue, which I believe is the first sacred seal.
Yes, absolutely. Working on the physical body there. Absolutely.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah, beautiful. Beautiful. Yeah, I love it. I'm hoping people listening to this are just inspired and now looking around them at like what's showing, because I get the same way like you do. This is what the world is like for me when I immerse myself in the dream arc. It's like there are no accidents. It is about paying attention. And I just love that with this, it's just like not, we could easily go into the mind, I think, where we overanalyze everything that shows up. But you're talking about just experiencing that the presence of that in this moment, in this, right, in this here and now. Now I'm curious to explore a little bit more. There are many in the world of Gene Keys who are also fascinated by this world that brought you and I together, the world of Avalon. And it was kind of funny. I was doing I was joining the live stream with the Into the Mystic event this weekend, and on the Saturday preceding the event, we had a guides meetup on Zoom, and they had a guides meeting and brunch on the ground at the hotel where they were all gathered together. And it happened to be in the Avalon room. And I was like, what? I'm not there. What? Data's not there. Tebow's not there. Like, and it's like, oh yeah, no, Avalon's the consciousness. Like, let's come back to that. But there is this love of an appreciation of this world of Avalon. And as I've put work out related to that, and as we've put our Clubhouse events out there, there's just this resonance within the heart for that. And so when you were in England, your time in England, this was pre-Gene Keys, this is pre-2012. So world was very different back then, people. If you weren't around in 2012, it was I'm joking. It was subtle. There were some subtle shifts and transformations. Just as always, the subtle. Appreciate the subtle. I think that's when we work with the flower essence, that's as important too. So when you were in England, this is where you received your herbalist training. Is that what you're saying? And so herbalism, this is a whole other aspect of your work. And it makes me totally think of like the 9 priestesses of Avalon, the healers, and feeling something like that deep in your being, right? So could you want to share something, about what drew you to the mystic of Avalon, the mystique of Avalon, and especially the West Country and herbalism there? That intrigues me.
Yeah, sure. So just briefly, I'll share that in 2004, I applied for a master's degree in what was at that time my field, which is media studies and media communication. And my intention was to be a media critic after I finished my master's degree in London, Goldsmiths College in London. And I was accepted and I was preparing to go to London. And during that year, my father became very, very ill and passed away in August of that year, 2 weeks before I moved to the UK. And my father died, and immediately, like a couple of days later, I received some blood test results that I had what they call, the allopaths call, an autoimmune condition, a thyroid autoimmune condition. So I moved to the UK, and the doors I had never heard anything about naturopathy or herbal medicine or flower essences or kinesiology or massage therapy or energy healing or gene keys. I mean, I never heard of anything. Well, the gene keys, I suppose, were just kind of coming out right around that time, 2004.
Yeah, they'd sprung from Richard before that, and he had kind of assimilated it. The book was launched, I think, in 2007, but the whispers were in the wind and the people were gathering.
Yes. Well, I guess I was maybe one of those people because I was in London. I was in the UK. And I had a boyfriend at the time that I'd met years before in Barcelona. And when I met him and I said, "What's the name of your village in England?" And he said, "Trowbridge, England," which is the West Country. My middle name is Trowbridge. And my grandmother's maiden name was Trowbridge. And my British line goes directly back to that village where my boyfriend was from. And so it just
I was just watching a show the other day, and the British Prime Minister, his last name is Trowbridge.
I saw it too. I was really excited because you don't hear that word that much. And it's not the most idyllic village in England. It's not terrible, but it's got some stuff going on, which is great. It's my homeland, so I'm not going to speak badly. But anyway, that was my hook in, because we would go back to visit his family near there in a small village and go for these epic British walks. And at that time, I had fallen into the hands of a naturopath and started learning what naturopathy was, and herbal medicine and flower essences and vibrational medicine, and all the doors to the healing art sort of swung open. And that's when I decided, and I was healing really well from the thyroid disease at that time with natural medicines. And so I decided to retrain. But I went to retrain at a great college, fantastic place in London called the College of Naturopathic Medicine, which is now 10 times the size it was in my day. But I always wanted to be a herbalist. So that was, you had to choose your specialty. But what had already happened to me, which I didn't have a language for at the time, is the herbs had already chosen me. And I didn't understand that until I came to Mexico and I met my mentor, and I started to hear more deeply the voices of the herbs, that they had chosen me because I'd always been listening to them. There was already a relationship. And so when I became a herbalist, it gave me a platform in a way to honor their medicine and speak to their medicine. And the ones that really were calling to me at that time were all the great British herbs, from all the West Country herbs, your nettles, your dock, your cleavers, your vervain, which for me is one of the most important herbs from the Glastonbury and the Druid tradition. Vervain is a very important herb. I know we talked about that.
And remind us all what vervain, what's its medicine?
So, such a big question. What's its medicine? The vervain is a magical herb of grace, is a nervous system tonic, is a third eye opener. It's a visionary kind of herb. It's a beautiful, tiny little purple flower. And in the Bach flower tradition, the vervain is for the leaders who lead by example with their passion, with their capacity to inspire. And the negative quality of the vervain in the Bach flower tradition are those of us who really want everybody to agree with us. So there's a sort of power play around the vervain archetype in that way. But when I tune into vervain, for example, seeing the vervain growing on the hill up to the Tor in Glastonbury is a weedy plant. Everybody knows the vervain around there. It's that tiny little purple flower. It's a sort of spiraling up. You can sort of feel it hit your third eye, and there's an expansiveness around connecting with the vervain medicine.
Yeah, I love that. And I love how you're talking about how they chose you, the herbs chose you. And it was reminding me of, something that I knew of, which was actually developed by some folks I knew in Mexico, where they were working with the combinations of different medicines. And this supplement, I guess you'd call it, that was really helping people who were having sleep problems, and it was going really well. But then it seemed like there were things about it that just were challenging for them. And I seem to remember hearing that part of it was that listening to the herbs, rather than saying we're working with the herbs and this is what they're for. This is you saying this is listening to the herbs, and it's like when we walk to the land, and instead of saying, oh, I want to put this on this land, it's like, what does the land want? And I hear that same thing in what you're sharing here, is that the herbs have chosen you because you've listened to them, you've been receptive, and oh, this is how the herbs want to express. They don't necessarily want to be turned into a wine or a beer or something like that. They want to be, this is what they're here for. This is their purpose. Is that what I'm hearing?
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And I think one of the ways that has been a maturity process for me and a humility process for me in terms of working with the plants is when we harvest, for example, we always ask permission. And sometimes you're going to get a no. And sometimes you're going to get a not today. Sometimes you're going to get a not right now, it's too hot. Sometimes you're going to get, you can't see it, but a dog just peed on me 5 minutes ago. And that's our responsibility as herbalists, to be really listening to these medicines, to know how to do the respectful harvest, and to also understand, very important from my perspective, is, the plants were here long before us. And they may be here long after us. We don't know how things are going to unfold, but they are the sacred witnesses of everything that has happened on this planet since they've been here. And they're the wisdom keepers. And a lot of times what happens is, for example, it's herbal medicine. We have to have a context. You ask me, what's the context of vervain? Well, I can tell you everything that I know, everything that I can pull out of myself, everything that's in my books. And the vervain is still going to give medicine that I don't know and I never will know. And that is very important in terms of our humility. And this is true about food as well. This is true about nutrition as well. We think we know everything the kale is giving us. We don't. We think we know everything the dandelion, we don't know. And so part of the practice is, when we receive herbal medicine, even if it's just a simple cup of chamomile or a tincture, whatever form or the essence is, whatever you're receiving is, thank you for giving me the medicine that I don't understand, but that I need. Thank you for your wisdom, because it's a relationship. As soon as the plant comes into our system, they're working with us on levels that our minds cannot understand, but that our other bodies can understand and receive. So that, I think that's very important.
Yeah, that's incredible. Yeah. The other bodies is in the subtle bodies of our being, right? And yeah. And, it makes me think of when we work with mythology and we see a symbol, and somebody can come in to look at this symbol. Oh, the chalice, the grail cup. Oh, okay. Oh, I know what that means. And then it's like, now we're no longer surrendering to the mystery. And that's what I've heard throughout there's this listening, there's this unraveling, there's a surrendering to the mystery. And this is beyond the understanding of the mind. And so I just love that as a way to approach it, which is why, for me, when it's like approaching these things, there isn't that one size fits all. It's like a very much, the art of listening is way more valuable than listening to somebody who's telling you what they have interpreted through their experiences. Or I find this stuff fascinating. So this is this is a conversation myself and Dana could just go on for years with. And so I'm just mindful in this space, we've got people here who are working with the gene keys and who are working with the dream arc as well. And we're seeing and hearing this, what you're sharing, I feel, is such an approach that really resonates with the approach within the dream arc, especially. And just that paying attention. And so if you had any kind of closing thoughts for anybody who's exploring the work of Gene Keys in the way you are, and just wondering what can support them in the embodiment from the realm of herbs and flower essences and just nature in general, is there anything that comes to mind that you might share in terms of just like final thoughts.
Yeah. I think when we're in contemplations, particularly with all the stimuli that we have and lots of different therapies available, and when we're in contemplation, there's nothing that isn't part of that contemplation. I think you would probably agree with that. That when you're in some contemplation of some field, of some pattern, of some archetype that's roaming through, or several, everything becomes part of that. So this paying attention element is very important. What do you feel drawn to? What feels drawn to you? Where's the resonance? I think the resonance is very important. And again, I think the presence is the medicine. So if your resonance frequency is to one particular tree, if your resonance is with one flower, if it's with one herb or one supplement or one archetype or one TV show, or one book, one person that you really want to talk to that week, or you feel really drawn to, or an old friend, all of these things are very important to heed and honor them without necessarily giving them unnecessary meaning. It's like, if that's the flower, then buy yourself flowers. If it's roses, buy yourself some rose perfume, buy yourself a bouquet, put some rose petals in your bath. I think true medicine is never complicated. True medicine is always simple, accessible, and potentially free. There's something around the concepts that we have of how do I take it, where do I buy it, all those things, which of course is part of the show, but there's also a way to receive medicine and give medicine that is very organic. So staying open to that and letting it move through in a natural way, I think is very uplifting.
I love that. I think that's a really nice summation there, and just something for all of us to put more deeply into practice. So I really appreciate this. And as we mentioned before, myself and Dana, we co-host alongside our friend Thibault. We Avalonians, as we call ourselves, came together and just thought we'd love to just continue to share this resonance with the world of Avalon. And as you can hear from Dana's experiences, the herbs have chosen her, and I just love that she's such an embodiment of the mystique of the Lady of the Lake, right? And the Lady of the Lake, this mythical being that's really, so much symbolizes the feminine mysteries, which you've explored here, Dana, and just also seen in traditional, they were seen as the healers. They were seen as the ones who worked and understand herbs. And so the time has come again for these priestesses of Avalon, these herbalists of Avalon, these to bring their medicine forward. And I've been interviewing others who are guides in the Gene Keys. The Gene Keys community seems to attract a lot of this kind of wisdom. So I know that everything that Dana's shared here is going to be of value and interest and intrigue to others who are watching here today. And so myself and Dana will be continuing to offer these Clubhouse gatherings. So with this focus on Avalon, and we listen to what wants to emerge, and what sometimes it's influenced by the pulse that we're pulsing through. So the last time we sat with the springs of Avalon and the theme of water. And here we are again, the 2 and the 8, this codon ring of water. And just exploring the nature of water and the springs in that way, and the mythology and the intrigue when it comes to springs in Avalon, and just how much the red springs and the white springs in Glastonbury and the Chalice Well Gardens have infused the lives of so many for millennia, really, for millennia. And so we will be continuing to offer these on Clubhouse, and we'll be sure to let you know. I'll have a link down here below, here, where you can click and join our Clubhouse. The Clubhouse gatherings are free, and then we'll have other offerings, I'm sure. One day we have our master vision of us coming together, bringing others and gathering with others, and having a right merry old time in England, in the West Country. And and so please do follow our work there. And Dana, if people want to reach out to you individually and explore more of this wisdom of yours, I've got your website below. Would you just want to say it out loud here anyway?
Yeah, my website is Resonantia with the TIA at the end, resonantia.mx. It's the same on Instagram, so you can Insta me, WhatsApp me, come visit.
There you go. Very welcome to Oaxaca. Oaxaca. How do we say it?
Oaxaca.
Oaxaca. Oaxaca. There we go. Englishman trying to learn Spanish here.
We'll get you there. We'll get there. Once you're down here, you'll get it.
Yeah, we'll get there. Yeah, yeah. And let's all go be close now. We've spent an hour listening to this, watching this. Maybe you're out listening as you walk, but pay attention, listen to nature, all that good stuff. And I'll be returning next week with some more wisdom from others in the Gene Keys community. We've got a couple of Gene Keys guides on the roster, and looking forward to continuing to interview more of them as time moves on. So big thank you to Dana for being here today. And thank you to everybody who's been watching, joining in with us today. And I trust that there's something here that might more help support you in imbibing the wisdom of both Gene Keys and the world around you. So thank you, Dana. Thank you, everybody out there. Have a beautiful week. Thank you.
Thank you.